Hello and welcome back. We have 0 undefeated teams left. The Sharks remain winless and pathetic in almost every statistical category, and some players stayed really hot, others started to get going, and we'll cover as much of it as we can in this video. And today we'll look at the schedule, the Data Draft Weekly schedule tool, we'll look at the waiver ads for this week, and some trending players as well. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in and start with the daily Faceoff schedule. Now, a little bit of a different wrinkle this week. Most of the games are on Monday night instead of Tuesday night. So that makes the light nights this week Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So Tuesday night, you've got LA versus Toronto, and then you've got Nashville and Vancouver. The Wednesday games, you've got Dallas, Calgary, Colorado, St. Louis, Calgary, Dallas, we already mentioned. We got Buffalo, Philly, and then Anaheim and Arizona. Then on that Friday, another Buffalo, Philly, so they play each other in a home and home. And then we've got the Devils and the Blues. The Devils also have another light night game, so they could be a 3-game week, but 2 light night game play this week. And they've got a favorable matchup at Chicago, so that's a little bit of a road trip there. They're in the central part of the United States going from Minnesota. The road back-to-back to St. Louis is tough. Then they've got Chicago, which should be a favorable matchup. But a couple of those teams, again, the Devils with 3 games, 2 light nights. Buffalo, because of this home and home, has 3 games, 2 light nights. And then we've got a number of other teams that have some favorable schedules, as we'll look at in the weekly schedule tool. You can see on the left here, Arizona 4 games, Dallas 4 games, Philly 4 games. They actually have 2 light nights. That Wednesday I didn't necessarily categorize as a light night originally, but it is. And then we've got Vegas with 4 games and a light night. All of these guys with back-to-backs. So that means that you will get a bunch of these guys who are available in most league formats that you can stream for a spot start this week. One of the main guys that I would look at, Vejmelka, is still only 53% owned. He's going to get a couple of starts this week, at least 2 or 3. They do have that back-to-back, so I would imagine at most 3, but he's going to get at least 2 starts. And then he's, a 69 on the goaltending hub, which is really nice to see. And then, on top of that, they have that Connor Ingram playing really well early on, but the stats kind of don't back it up right now just because he's been getting shelled as of late. He was relatively available, 2% owned in most leagues. 889 save percentage is a problem, but that's mainly due to a small sample size, and he will be used this week. So you could potentially go to him in that back-to-back. One of the guys I would look at for a back-to-back is Scott Wedgwood. He's usually a really good goaltender, around a 910 save percentage. Dallas is a really good defensive team. Right now he's got an 889 save percentage, so it's not quite been there, but it is a small sample size. And he's only 3% owned. So that would be one of the stronger spot start opportunities there, is this Dallas Scott Wedgwood play. Then you also have Eric Comrie. Buffalo's playing that Friday, Saturday back-to-back, and Comrie will have to get one of those. So here's the little fact anomaly that is going on in the Buffalo crease. Devin Levi with an 892 save percentage is 77% owned. Eric Comrie with a 914 save percentage is 5% owned. So this could be an opportunity to pair the two together if you own Levi and he's been struggling. If you do want some exposure there, but you don't have anybody, I would pick up Comrie, 5% owned. He's probably available for you, and they do have that back-to-back, so he will get one of those games unless they give it to UPL, but he hasn't been particularly great at an 881 save percentage. He's 14% owned. So of the 3 goaltenders, Comrie is the most available and the best. So that's kind of a no-brainer as we're just looking at some of these. The rest of these are probably owned up, all the guys at the top. And then towards the bottom, Sam Ersson, he's kind of a victim of a small sample size here, but it is a terrible save percentage at 760. He's 1% owned, and Philly will have a decent schedule this week. As I mentioned, 4 games, a back-to-back, and 2 light nights. So they will probably use Ersson at least once, but right now, Carter Hart, the best goaltender on the goalie hub, as we'll look at in just a little bit. So they'll probably ride him for 3 games this week if they can. Now we're going to look over at the player hub to look at some of the weekly ads in terms of skaters this week, because we can get into a little bit more detail. But just looking at this from the top, some of the best players in the league right now, Travis Konechny, he's probably owned up in a lot of leagues, but I think he's 86% owned, so he's not completely owned up. You could still pick him up in some shallower league formats. Then you've got some other guys that we'll look at in just a minute, and let's just do that right now. We'll go over to the player hub. So as I mentioned, Travis Konechny, a goal per game is incredible pace. That's right there with Frankie Vetrano. who has 8 goals in 8 games, and he was on the cover of this video, the thumbnail. Konechny right around the same goal pace, 1.38 points per game. Shot volume is really good at 3.63. Getting some power play production. Hits and blocks are not non-existent, so they're not targetable, but he is still relatively complete at a 74. As we move a little bit further down to guys you may be able to own, Owen Tippett, 32% owned. That shot volume is crazy, 3.8 shots per game. The goals will come. They were there last year, and so are the hits and blocks. These are a little bit low for him. The power play production will improve as well. He doesn't have a power play point yet, but again, he was getting these categories all last year, so I would expect there is still room to grow. He was a mid-70s player in completeness rating last year, and he did improve 13 spots up to a 60, and he's still got room to grow there. So this could be a nice opportunity to pick up Tippett in front of a 4-game week with 2 light nights. A guy that I streamed last week, Paul Cotter. Look at this hits volume, 3.78 hits per game, 100th percentile, and you're getting that from a forward. You don't have to necessarily use a defenseman for this. He's one of those rare forwards that's going to get you a ton of hits and some offensive production. Usually that's the Tom Wilson type, and Tom Wilson is kind of getting back into form. He's 47% owned, a goal and 3 assists in his last 5 games, but Paul Cotter has been really hot as well. 34 hits, I believe, in 9 games. So yeah, over 3.78 hits per game is incredible. And then he's still getting some offensive production. He's got the 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in those 9 games. So, and he's getting some power play time apparently as well. So that could be a sneaky little play, especially in certain league formats where some of those categories, the banger leagues where you're getting a point per hit, he's definitely more valuable there. Now, the theme of this video is going to be Flyers, and another Flyer who's been a storyline up to this point in the season is Travis Sanheim, a point per game defenseman, very assist heavy. The shot volume is pretty decent for a defenseman, 2.63 shots per game, 87th percentile on the power play. The blocks are there, 1.75 blocks per game, and then the goal production is not bad either. He's got a goal already, so he's been getting the power play time in Philadelphia, so this is a guy that you're going to want to target. Nobody seems to be owning up Philadelphia Flyers, and really quick, let's go take a look at the Flyers ownership just to show you what I mean. So this is sorted by just Flyers, and it's sorted by percentage rostered. So Konechny is relatively owned up at 86%. Sanheim is the next best at 48%, but everybody else is ownable in a 12-team league. Owen Tippett, Sean Couturier, he's been playing really well, and especially in a face-off league, you're going to want Couturier. Cam Atkinson has been playing a lot better lately. He took a little bit to get going, but he's been really productive. 2 goals, 3 assists in his last 3 games, 2 of those on the power play. He's only 16% owned. Scott Lawton is another guy who's been fantasy relevant at various points last year, 7% owned this year. And then you move your way on down. Cam York, not playing poorly there either. Joel Farabee, 6 points, 4 of them goals, and he's only 3% owned. Sean Walker, 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists, getting some hits and blocks as well as some shots, and he's only 3% owned. And then if you look at it by where they are, this is just a standard categories league. A lot of these guys are ownable. Bobby Brink, 2% owned, 2 goals, 4 assists, 2 of those on the power play, 2% owned. That's a nice deep league play. Same thing with Farabee and York. Delorier is your hitter with 24 hits so far in the season. So a lot of these guys can serve a purpose in your lineup. Just wanted to highlight how ownable all of these guys are, and the Flyers are playing really good hockey right now, so that is a team that you want exposure to. And then again, they do have that 4-game week with 2 light nights. But let's get back to the Player Hub and look at some more options. Now, Nick Schmaltz is a guy who's been relevant for the last couple of years. 1.14 points per game. The assist volume is really good, 98th percentile there. The power play production, 89th percentile there. The shots could be a little bit better, but he is dual eligible, center, right wing. So if you're in a face-off league where you want those wingers that are taking some face-offs, he's even more valuable there. And he's a 69, so relatively complete on the completeness rating. And you know what you're going to get out of him. He's consistently over a point per game player and a guy that you can count on for production as he's in the top 6, top line, top power play and everything in Arizona. Now, as we move a little bit further down, Eric Haula he was a guy last year that we were looking at on the expected to break out type of content that we were doing, where he was getting a lot of chances, just had a low shooting percentage, couldn't finish. Well, this year he's finishing. So 97th percentile in goal production, 4 goals on the season already. He's got a couple power play points, and he's getting an opportunity in the top 9. Not necessarily the exposure you'd like in terms of a top 6 player, but the Devils have had pretty good schedules so far this year, and they have another decent one with 2 light night games this week, so he could be a nice streaming option for you. Then you have Jason Zucker. Oh, I forgot to mention Hall at 19% owned, so he is available for you. Jason Zucker, 16% owned. He's been one of those guys with hits, shots, and goal volume, and you're seeing that again, 1.4 hits per game, the 2.8 shots per game, and then the goal production. That's right on brand for Zucker, and he's getting some power play time in Arizona, so that's nice to see. Not as complete. The assists will probably come even, just getting some rebounds where he takes a shot and somebody else puts it in. That'll bump his assists up a little bit. So there is some room for improvement here from Zucker, and he's really ownable, 16% owned, as I just mentioned. Then you've got a couple of other guys. Dursey, again, another Arizona play. He's been really productive early on in the season. 3 goals from a defenseman is really good. You got 2.5 shots per game, some power play production, a couple of blocks, 1.71 blocks per game. He's a little bit more owned up, 67%, but he is still available in some shallow leagues. He would definitely be a target there. Here's Cam Atkinson, who I briefly mentioned before. He's at a point per game right now, really goal heavy, getting some shot volume and some power play time. And again, 15%, 16% owned, as I just updated it just now. So he's a really nice option. They've got 3 really good right wingers in Philly. They've got Tippett, Konechny, and Atkinson. All of them are ownable, especially this week. I just mentioned Sean Couturier not that long ago. Power play production with assists. He's got a couple of goals on the season, so that is nice to see. But he's been one of those guys that's been a good storyline coming back after a year off. Same thing with Cam Atkinson, and both of them look really good to start the season. They're both mid-level completeness ratings, 67 and 64, but they are providing some power play production. So if you're in a points league that weights that a little bit differently, they are, again, targets this week with that nice schedule. Caden Korzak still really complete for Vegas. He's been getting a little bit of power play time as well. Regressed a little bit from week to week, but still 2 hits per game is nice to see. The shot volume you'd like to come up a little bit, but this is a 5 or 6 defenseman for Vegas, and he's getting an opportunity and making it count. Speaking of Vegas, William Karlsson is a guy 36% owned, should be a little bit higher than that. The assists are really good there, over a point per game, getting some blocks, getting the shot volume could come up a little bit, and you would expect some power play production to start coming, as he is one of those guys that they lean on in Vegas for offense and a number of other things. He's a very good two-way center, but he's another target in a 4-game week that you might want to look at. And they do have that Sunday game, so that could be a last-minute pickup on Saturday night or Sunday morning. Now, Michelli and Cooley are both very similar for Arizona, very power play and assist heavy, but if you have a points league that weighs those things a little bit more, these are 2 very ownable players. If I'm looking at it right now, Michelli 5% owned, so that is definitely a guy that you can have in most league formats. Logan Cooley's in the low 30s, but he's very similar, just getting a little bit more blocks production out of Cooley. The power play production really good so far, 5 power play points in 7 games. And he was starting out as a point per game type of player, kind of tailed off a little bit as the schedule got harder for them. They did have a little bit lighter schedule last week, and now they come back with a little bit heavier schedule this week and some light nights. So he could be a nice target for you as well. I mentioned Bobby Brink a little bit earlier. He's getting the power play production and assists. He got his first couple goals in his NHL career the other night, 2-goal game. So Bobby Brink is another guy you can target from Philadelphia. They have a ton. And here's another one, Joel Farabee. As I mentioned before, 90th percentile in goal production, 4 goals in 8 games. That's right on brand for Farabee and what he's been doing over the last number of years as he's starting to piece his game back together. Had a really good season, I believe, 2 years ago. Last year was a little bit of a middling season, and now he's got it back on the right track. So he's another target for you. But that's going to do it for this video. We're going to split off the trending skaters and goalie information into tomorrow's video. So that'll be part 2 of the weekly video. There's just too much to cover to bring it all into one video and give you guys the stuff that you need to make decisions tonight. So we made part 1 about the schedule and the waiver ads that you can use if you're trying to maximize the schedule. And then part 2 tomorrow, we'll look at some of the hottest players and goalies in the league. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's video looking at those trending players. As always, I'll see you in the next one.